Hi, I'm Jeff Sharon from UCF Sports Night. You can now watch UCF TV 24 hours a day on Bright House Digital Channel 1.
Hello and welcome to the Global Perspective Show. I'm John Bercia, Special Assistant to the President for Global Perspectives. Our guest today is Dr. Michael Gunter from Tennessee Tech University and one of the world's leading authorities on Kurdish Affairs. Welcome, Dr. Gunter.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. As you know, we have a new Kurdish political studies initiative here at the university with an endowed chair coming online in the near future. And you happen to be the very first person in our distinguished speaker series on the subject. Tell us, for the benefit of those who may not know a whole lot about the Kurds, a little bit about who the Kurds are, where they live, and how they fit into the conversation in 2009.
Well, as you know, the Kurds live in the Middle East, where Turkey, Iran, Iraq meet. So they are largely a mountainous people. They are related to the Iranians, but they are not related to the Turks and Arabs. And they are Indo-European speaking, largely Sunni Muslim, or there are some Shiite Kurds. They are a majority in the geographical area where they live, called Kurdistan, but they have been gerrymandered into being mere minorities within the four states that they inhabit: Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. So the Kurdish problem amounts to the fact that the states in which they live do not want to give the Kurds any rights, because that might lead to the breakup of these four states.
Now, I know it's hard to pinpoint the exact size of this Kurdish population, but just ballpark, again, for the benefit of the viewers.
Well, nobody knows for certain, because the Kurds exaggerate their numbers and the states in which they live play down the numbers for obvious political reasons. But maybe there are 25 million Kurds in the world, which makes them the largest nation in the world without its own independent state. And again, the Kurds are divided between these four independent states in the Middle East: Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And also there's a growing Kurdish diaspora in Europe, maybe as much as 1 million Kurds living in Europe. That's probably a little too high, but 1 million in the diaspora and maybe 30,000 in the United States.
Well, tell us about Kurds in the 21st century. They seem to be more prominent than ever before, moving up politically in places like Iraq and Turkey. What does this mean? Is this the direction for the future, or are we talking about something that depends a lot on changing circumstances?
Well, I think it's the direction for the future, because as the Israeli-Palestinian situation winds down, that's probably being too optimistic, but for many years the Middle Eastern question has been the Arab-Israeli situation, but increasingly the Kurdish issue has become also important in the Middle East. And to the extent that the Arab-Israeli situation is solved, the Kurdish issue bids to become the major issue in the Middle East, certainly an increasingly important issue, because so many factors, but much of the water in the Middle East originates in Kurdistan. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers originate in Kurdistan. A great deal of the oil, Kirkuk, is in Kurdish areas. So oil, and even more importantly, water, has to do with the Kurds. And of course, the Kurds have become important because of the war in Iraq, and also because of Turkey's EU accession process right now. So 30 years ago, the Kurds were not even on the radar, or barely there, and now they have become much more important.
And the Kurdish leadership in Iraq specifically would probably account for much of that, including the current president.
It's interesting that Kurds who 20 years ago were nothing more than guerrilla nomads and now become fledgling statesmen. President of Iraq, for example, Jalal Talabani.
Interesting. And how is this being received in the various countries where they are minority populations? And as you said, collectively they make up this huge stateless population, but they are minorities within the countries where they reside.
This is being received begrudgingly because, again, the states in which the Kurds live do not want to admit many rights to the Kurds, fearing that that would challenge their own territorial integrity. But in the past 10, 20 years, because of these events I've just been talking about, the Iraqi wars against Saddam Hussein and Turkey's EU accession, the Kurds have begrudgingly received more rights and recognition than they've ever had before. And the art is to hold on to this and not lose it, because if the United States leaves Iraq, which it certainly will shortly, there'll be no great power protector of the Kurds anymore in Iraq, and the danger is that the Kurds will be reduced to where they were before as the Arabs in Iraq reassert themselves.
Now, in the United States, when the average person hears about Kurds and Kurdish affairs, it's often in the context of political violence in Turkey, for example. You don't hear a whole lot about Kurds operating in these other realms, although increasingly so in Iraq in recent years. But these are different groups. I know they're all part of the same community in a global sense, but these are Kurds operating in different environments with different agendas.
Yes, in Turkey, the Kurds have carried on a long-running insurgency since 1984 and are, as a result, officially on the U.S. and EU terrorist list. I might be the only American academic who ever met and interviewed the leader of the PKK in Turkey, Abdullah Öcalan, just before he was captured by Turkey in February 1999, almost exactly 10 years ago, with American help in Kenya. And at the time I met him, Öcalan, the leader of the PKK, admitted that, yes, he had used terrorist tactics, but if you look at history, you'll see that the real terrorist in all this has been the Turkish state and the way it treated its Kurds. On the other hand, even more so, Saddam Hussein carried out an Anfal campaign against the Kurds in the early and mid-1990s and late 1980s. Anfal campaign of Saddam Hussein is really a synonym for genocide. So in Iraq, there's a genocidal history, and part of the charges against the Ba'athist regime in Iraq simply genocide against the Kurds, which arguably is the most horrendous crime imaginable under international law.
Tell us a little bit about Kurdistan within Iraq, how it has distinguished itself, what its potential is over the short term.
Well, historically, the Kurds were nomads living in the mountains. That image is completely passé now. Since the first Iraqi war in 1991, most of the Kurds in Iraq have moved into the cities. I would say the Iraqi Kurdish population now is 90% urbanized. They have two cities close to 1 million people, Erbil, the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan, and Sulaymaniyah. And the last time I was in Erbil, there was a stretch where I almost thought I was going through DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., where if you know Connecticut Avenue goes down under the tunnel and then up, and they had the same thing in downtown Erbil. Traffic jams, tremendous amount of construction going on. It's just an incredible revelation what these formerly forgotten nomadic people have been able to do, largely because of the what the United States was able to pull off in Iraq. So where George Bush is a prophet without respect in his own house today and probably much of the world, to the Iraqi Kurds, George Bush is a hero because of the United States defeat of Saddam Hussein, which allowed this incredible growth to occur and outbreak of democracy to occur in Iraqi Kurdistan.
Now, a lot of this growth and the foundation for it was actually happening after the end of the first Gulf War back in the early 1990s. But then it was not the story that it is today, because the average person here anyway wasn't paying much attention. But people are paying more attention now since the 2003 intervention in Iraq and the aftermath. And so that has helped raise the profile of Kurds in the United States, I would think. But where does all of this go? So you've got Kurds doing well in Kurdistan. You've got Kurds in top political positions. But what do you think are the sort of midterm and long-term possibilities here? Do things bode well or ill?
Well, the midterm possibilities are that the Kurds are doing very well, the best they've done in modern times. But the long-term possibilities are very iffy, tenuous, because as Arab Iraq reasserts itself, inevitably the Arabs in Iraq are going to try to reduce the Kurds again. And if and when the United States withdraws from Iraq, the Kurds will have lost their great power protector. So in Iraq itself, the Kurds will be in a very tenuous position, not to mention their hostile neighbors, the Turks, Iranians, and Syrians, who don't want a semi-autonomous Iraqi Kurdistan because it would act as a magnet for the Kurds living in those three countries.
Do you think people view the Kurdish issue as one of the significant regional issues that need to be resolved as part of the overall solution to the security and stability challenges in the Middle East?
More so than in the past, but nowhere as much as most Kurds would want it to be, or as I would think it should be. Again, I think next to the Arab-Israeli situation, the Kurdish issue bids fair to be the most important issue in the Middle East, because you're dealing with the origin of much of the water, a great deal of the oil, and the largest nation without its own independent state, which inherently destabilizes the situation. And it's not so much that the Kurds destabilize the situation, but it's because of the way the Kurds are treated that destabilizes the situation.
What are your views regarding the overall challenges that the United States faces in the Middle East under the new administration, and what do you think about the new U.S. Middle East envoy, Mr. Mitchell, and his prospects?
Well, Mr. Mitchell, George Mitchell, is of Arabic origin. Most people don't realize that because he has an American-sounding name. And he has a very good track record as a diplomat. He carried out some great work in Northern Ireland. So we have probably our best diplomats on the job. But history teaches that this is not a problem that will be solved overnight, if ever. So I am not very optimistic about the future, at least the immediate future, between Israel and the Palestinians. Indeed, all signs point to a Likud victory and Benjamin Netanyahu becoming the prime minister of Israel again. And of course, he's a hardliner, and he is no friend of a Palestinian state. To me, it's obvious what the solution is in Israel. Two-state solution. You have to pull the Israeli settlements out of the West Bank, and the two have to share Jerusalem as their capital. Unfortunately, the Israeli peace movement is in great decline now because of the unfortunate violence that Hamas and Hezbollah have brought upon Israel in the last few years. Afghanistan is America's most immediate problem. We got sidetracked from Afghanistan and the Al-Qaeda by our misadventures in Iraq. There was no legitimate reason to go into Iraq. The two main reasons we went into Iraq for were both, frankly, falsehoods. There was no WMD, weapons of mass destruction there, and Saddam Hussein, although not exactly a friend of the United States, was not in back of al-Qaeda. But we went into Iraq, used up a great deal of our resources there on that adventure, which did the Kurds a lot of good, I admit, but in terms of American national interests, wasn't really where we should have been, because it allowed Osama bin Laden and his al-Qaeda group off the hook. And they remain a serious problem for us. And I think the new administration recognizes that and is therefore trying to wind down in Iraq and apply what we can to the situation in Afghanistan. And the situation in Afghanistan, I think, means reducing al-Qaeda, not conquering Afghanistan. Nobody has ever conquered Afghanistan. Alexander the Great tried, the British tried in the 19th century, the Russians used that as the final act of the demise of the Soviet Union, and if we're wise, we'll learn from that too. To be successful in Afghanistan, we have to work with the powers that be in Afghanistan, and I think we're recognizing that. We're working now behind the scenes with moderate Taliban groups, which is somewhat obnoxious, I admit, but it's not in the power of the United States to dictate to the whole world. Indeed, with our own current economic problems, we better get our own economic house in order before we think we can go around the world spending all kinds of money remaking the world in our own image, which is not possible.
Do you have a sense of where to go back to the Kurdish issue specifically, where it ranks among the matters facing the Obama administration? And if you don't have a sense of where it is, where do you think it should rank?
Well, I have a sense that it's not very important. Much more important for the Obama administration, whether it realizes it or not yet, and it soon will, is Turkey. Turkey has been a major American ally all through since the end of World War II, and because of Turkey's large population, strategic location, moderate Islamic State, aspiring to join the EU, second largest army in NATO, Turkey is extremely important to the United States. Therefore, how can the Kurds be our top ally? The best we can do for the Kurds is to show Turkey that as long as there's a Kurdish problem, this hurts Turkey, so that if Turkey is wise and wants to continue its great economic progress, it has to come to a reasonable solution of the Kurdish problem, and far from hurting Turkey, this would help Turkey.
Could you explain that a little bit further, because there may be some viewers who aren't making the connection as to how the embrace of this issue by Turkey and its constructive resolution could actually help Turkey itself?
As long as there's a Kurdish insurgency in Turkey or Kurdish instability in Turkey, Turkey is weakened by that. And Turkey has great prospects for an economic future. It's the 17th largest economy in the world. It was just recently elected to be a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. It is an energy conduit between Central Asia and Russia on the one hand and Europe on the other hand. Turkey has taken all kinds of initiatives to bring about stability and economic growth in the Middle East and in the Caucasus. But all this is going to be questioned so long as you have an unstable domestic situation in Turkey with the Kurds. Unfortunately, the Turks have always felt that to recognize Kurdish rights in Turkey challenges the existence of Turkey. So the Turks try to keep the Kurds down, and this causes the Kurds to react negatively. I would say the Turks should try the opposite thing. Give Kurdish rights to the Kurds in Turkey, and you will find that most Kurds are loyal Kurds serving the Turkish state. And what Turkey needs is full democratization. That would solve the Kurdish problem in Turkey and enable Turkey to pursue its economic interests to the benefit of Turkey and the rest of the world.
If you were advising the new U.S. administration on sort of next steps to take in dealing with the Kurds and other issues in the Middle East, what would be your top three list? Where should they start and where would they go from there?
With the Kurds or in general? With
the
Middle
Kurds
East?
and in general. Maybe start with the Kurds and then broaden.
For the Middle East. Realize that you cannot solve this overnight.
Yes.
It's as the Chinese proverb says, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with that proverbial single step. But the very image that Obama projects of consultation with our allies and respect for others and going the multilateral way rather than America, love it or leave it, or do it our way, or you're our enemy, that the Bush administration was associated with. This change in attitude on the part of Obama, I think, is very important and will help and create a better atmosphere. Next, I think we have to deal with the situation in Afghanistan, which we are fast losing. And if we lose in Afghanistan, the Al-Qaeda has a safe base from which it can regroup and cause havoc in the West. Maybe even more importantly, though, is Iran. Iran is a historically great state in the Middle East, whether we like it or not. And Iran is on its way to building nuclear weapons. And Iran is no friend of the United States. And how we solve this problem of Iran is of first-rate importance to the Obama administration. And to his credit, many people thought George Bush might just try to pull off an October surprise and start a war with Iran. He did not. But the problem remains, and Obama is going to have to do something with Iran. And I think astute diplomacy can bring about a satisfactory relationship with Iran. Iran is having new presidential elections later this spring. And the United States in the background will play a very important role here. And if the United States is seen as threatening, Ahmadinejad will probably reemerge in Iran. The United States takes a more constructive attitude toward Iran. We might see the Iranians themselves bringing about the necessary change in attitude by bringing in new leadership. So I think these are some of the immediate problems, and of course there are many more.
But then vis-a-vis the Kurds, is there anything specific that the new administration should do?
Well, as you see, and the Kurds won't like this, the Kurds are really very secondary. And I think the Kurds have to realize this. And if they do and are modest, but then still stand up for their rights, I think the Obama administration will realize that we do owe the Kurds some support, because the Kurds were our loyal ally in the 2003 war when Turkey refused to support us and denied us a northern front, which the Iraqi Kurds stepped in and gave us and helped immensely. So if the Kurds realize that they live in a much larger world and are of only secondary interest to the United States, then Kurdish demands on the U.S. will not be so grandiose that the Kurds are completely ignored. And so I would advise the Kurds to remember what Clint Eastwood said: a man has to know his limitations, but within those limitations still stand up for their rights. And then I think the United States will be supporting the Kurds, and also Turkey will not be so deathly afraid of Kurdish rights. And in the long run, Turkey will come to see the Kurds as something acceptable on their southern border, or maybe even a buffer from all the instability in the Middle East. And this will take astute leadership and diplomacy on the part of the Kurds, but that's what they need, and not all kinds of demands on the United States and the Arabs and the Turks, which maybe the Kurds think are justified demands, but are going, I think, a bridge too far.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Gunter, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for the Global Perspective Show. I'm John Bercia, and we'll see you next time.